Some people see an incoming call and immediately think, please don't make me answer that. You might like the person calling. You might even want to talk to them. But somehow a text message feels completely normal, while a phone call feels like an unexpected exam you didn't study for. You see the screen light up, you let it ring. Then 30 seconds later, you receive a text, "Hey, are you free?" And suddenly you're perfectly comfortable replying. So what's going on? Why can someone happily spend an hour texting yet feel strangely uncomfortable talking on the phone? The answer isn't simply that they're antisocial. In many cases, they're not avoiding people. They're avoiding the unpredictability of the interaction. Think about texting. You can read the message, pause, think, rewrite your response, delete it, try again, then send it. A phone call removes almost all of that control. Someone speaks, you have to respond immediately. And for people who naturally think before they speak, that tiny difference can feel enormous. Imagine you're sitting at home when your phone suddenly rings. You weren't mentally prepared for a conversation. You don't know what they want. You don't know how long it'll last. You don't know whether you'll have to make a decision. And you don't know when the conversation will end. That's the strange part about phone calls. The uncertainty begins before the conversation even starts. A text usually tells you what the person wants. A call simply says, something is happening. Find out what it is. For some people, that lack of information creates immediate mental friction. They start wondering, why are they calling? Is something wrong? What am I supposed to say? How long is this going to take? And now they're not just answering a phone, they're mentally rehearsing an entire conversation that hasn't happened yet. But there's another layer. Phone conversations require constant social processing. You're listening to someone's words, but you're also interpreting their tone, their pauses, their hesitation, their energy. And because you can't see their face, you lose some of the visual information that normally helps you understand what they mean. Was that silence awkward? Were they annoyed? Did they misunderstand you? Were they joking? Your brain has to fill in some of those missing pieces. And for someone who naturally notices small social signals, a phone call can become surprisingly exhausting. You aren't just listening to the conversation, you're decoding it. That's why someone might finish a 20-minute call and feel like they just completed a social workout. Now, here's something interesting. People who dislike phone calls often aren't necessarily bad communicators. Some are actually very good communicators. They simply prefer communication that gives them time to process. Text allows precision. You can choose your words. You can organize your thoughts. You can communicate without worrying about interrupting someone. And that can be especially appealing to people who don't enjoy speaking just to fill silence. They would rather think first, then speak. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. In fact, some people don't dislike conversation. They dislike forced immediacy. Here's where modern communication makes this even more interesting. We've become accustomed to asynchronous communication. You send something, the other person responds when they're available. There isn't necessarily an expectation of immediate interaction. So when a phone call suddenly appears, it can feel almost intrusive, not because the caller is doing something wrong, but because the call demands your attention right now. And attention has become one of the most protected resources in modern life. You might be working, reading, cooking, walking, thinking, resting, then suddenly, ring, ring, your brain has to switch modes. And for some people, that interruption is more irritating than the conversation itself. But there's an even deeper psychological reason some people avoid calls: control. When you text, you control the pace. When you call, the other person controls part of the rhythm. They decide when the next question arrives. You have to react. You can't easily disappear for 5 minutes to formulate the perfect answer. And if you're someone who values independence and predictability, that loss of control can feel uncomfortable. This is why some people don't mind meeting someone face-to-face, but still hate unexpected calls. A scheduled conversation gives them preparation. An unexpected call gives them uncertainty. And preparation changes everything. There's also a social expectation hiding inside the phone call. When someone calls you, there's an invisible rule. You're expected to answer. But a text doesn't carry quite the same pressure. You can respond later. You can be busy. You can take your time. And this is why declining a call can sometimes feel strangely emotional. You may know logically that you don't have to answer, but another part of your brain is thinking, what if they think I'm ignoring them? What if they need me? What if this is important? So you don't answer and then spend the next 10 minutes wondering whether you should call back. Ironically, avoiding the call can sometimes create more mental work than taking it. But here's the distinction that matters most. Not everyone who hates phone calls is anxious. Some people simply prefer text. Others dislike interruptions. Some process information better visually. Some enjoy face-to-face communication because they can read body language. And some simply don't find spontaneous phone conversations rewarding. So don't turn one behavior into a personality diagnosis. The more useful question is, what exactly are you trying to avoid when the phone rings? The conversation, the uncertainty, the interruption, the pressure to respond instantly, or the possibility of being misunderstood? Your answer tells you much more than whether you answer the phone. And maybe that's why the person who never answers your calls isn't necessarily cold. They might actually care about the conversation enough to want to have it on their terms. They may want to know what you need first. They may want a moment to prepare. They may communicate better when they can choose their words. Or maybe they simply need a little more control over when their social energy gets spent. Because there's an important difference between "I don't want to talk to you" and "I don't want to be interrupted by a conversation I wasn't prepared for." Those sound similar. Psychologically, they're completely different. So the next time your phone rings and your first instinct is to let it go to voicemail, don't immediately assume something is wrong with you. Maybe you don't hate people. Maybe you don't hate conversations. Maybe you simply prefer communication that gives your mind a little room to breathe. And in a world where everything seems to demand an immediate response, sometimes wanting a moment before you answer isn't avoidance. It's simply the way you prefer to connect.